Welcome to this YouTube edition of our Highland League Weekly results panel, which is taken from our main Highland League Weekly Monday show, which is over on the Press and Journal website and features highlights of 2 games, as well as a feature this week with former Highland League star Grant Campbell. To access the full show, you need to be a subscriber to the Press and Journal website, and at the moment the good news is you can subscribe via our Sport Pack for just £1 for your first 3 months. Here we'll just be discussing all 8 of the weekend's results in the Brechin Highland League. We're starting with our main game, which came from North Lodge Park. It was for Martin United 0, Brora Rangers 1, and not to spoil our second game, but on a weekend where Brechin City, the leaders, dropped points, this was a great result, Callum, for second place Brora Rangers.
Aye, and it was against the odds a wee bit, obviously playing sort of the last 40 minutes with 10 men, but it's funny with the way it kind of worked out with the conditions, in that I felt both teams sort of found it easier to create chances when they were playing against the wind rather than with it. I mean, if you look at the first half when Brora had it, didn't really create anything of note. I mean, they had a lot of set pieces and balls into the box, but nothing really major, whereas for Martin had the Wade chance, the Johnny Crawford header, the Dungana chance that Kami Mackay saved, and then second half again, like with Brora, it's like Shane Sutherland had that one saved just before the goal. They've scored. There's a couple of dangerous balls flashed across the box. George Robinson was in again late on. It was sort of strange how it worked out, but I think particularly once it went down to 10 men as well, George Robinson's sort of pace and his energy was useful for Brora in terms of allowing them to still pose a threat when for the majority of the second half they did have to sort of soak up periods of pressure, but he was a bit of an out ball and a willing runner, and he's obviously come up trumps with the big moment to earn Brora a vital 3 points.
Stuart Anderson must be delighted he's not playing Brora again this season though, because that's 4 games, 4 defeats, and of varying different outcomes as well. The manners that it's happened, and it's...
The thing is, it's kind of like the first game, the reverse league game, you kind of write off because Matthew McLean got sent off in the first minute, so game's a bit of a bogey from there on in. But the game on Saturday and the 2 previous to that, there's been very little between the teams really. All of them played in not great conditions either, with wind, and it's like, it's maybe you can't just say it for Martin are unlucky, but it does feel a wee bit like that in a sense, because even in the closing stages, like Robert Ward's free kick sitting behind it, I thought it was in, it hits the post, and then they've had a few things at corners. Aidan Coombs had one blocked, Scott Adams has had one blocked. Like, I didn't think they deserved to lose that game on Saturday, but for whatever reason, and give credit to Brora for keeping a clean sheet in that, but for as you're saying, for whatever reason this season, for Martin just haven't been able to sort of find the magic formula against Brora.
The red cards, the 2 bookings for Alex Cooper, what did you make of them?
I think they are bookings. He's late. I don't think either challenge is particularly malicious.
I think the first one, in fairness, I don't think there's really much attempt to play the ball. Like, I'd say it was a stick on. The second one, I can understand where Stephen Mackay's coming from, but I do think if you talk about quick succession, I think if Cooper hadn't been booked earlier, he would have
been booked for that.
He would have been booked for the second one, so I think it was probably fair enough. I would give referee Owen Lawrence credit as well. I think in terms of...
We should pause that here. Can you want to say that again?
Aye, I'll give referee Owen Lawrence credit because, like, was challenging conditions, but I thought the way he sort of handled the game overall was pretty good, and he was willing to start it and sort of monitored it as it went on, and it was probably getting to the point that in the second half where it maybe got worse with the wind, that he did start to think, oh, could this be getting dodgy? But I thought in the main he handled it well and gave us, everyone that was there and our cameras and everything, our viewers, a game to watch, so fair play to him for that. One last, if you want to talk about decisions, maybe contentious ones up for Martin, penalty appeal in the first half. Obviously we don't have the definitive sort of angle to say whether the contact was inside the box or not, but it looks very, very close.
I can't disagree. Yeah, because obviously I did the commentary and I'm looking, going, is that in? Is that? You just can't say definitively from either angle whether it's in the box, but it's very close. Very close.
I think the hard thing for Owen is when you see the GoPro angle from like beside the goal. If you see the ball coming across, and like understandable, like most folk, he's following the ball as it comes across, so he probably only catches the sort of tail end of it out the corner of his eye, and in that sort of split second having to make a call. And obviously we've seen higher up similar issues, but obviously you've got VAR to fall back on, but in that split second having to make that call is a very tough decision. And I suppose if you've got any doubt, it's probably the safer option to award a free kick rather than a penalty. But for Martin, who felt it should have been a penalty, that's no consolation to them, clearly.
It's just a shame now that Christmas week, as we've seen higher up, will be dominated by the controversy by the Northwest part, penalty or no penalty. Worth mentioning, Brora made a signing at the weekend, didn't they, Callum?
Well, they've made two, but Gary Poulin signed on Friday from Wick, which is quite an interesting one because he's somebody sort of in the last 18 months coming into the Highland League with Wick, signing from Golspie Sutherland. He's done well for Wick, played quite a few positions, whether it's been midfield or left back on occasion, and he's only 20, and he's local to Brora, being for Golspie, and looks one for, I mean, just now, but also the future. And Stephen Mackay's sort of spoken about signing like him, Craig McKenzie, who's 21, Connor Bunce is 23, that type of player who can be at Brora for a long time to come and sort of be the sort of almost in sort of next generation of Brora players, kind of sort of had the same core for a long time, and they've had to overhaul that. And then on Sunday they signed Wallace Duffy, who was at Strathspey and was transfer listed on Thursday, and then by Friday lunchtime he'd been released, and Brora have sort of moved in to sign him. And on the face of it, that should be a good signing for them as well. 25, so you'd feel he's sort of coming into his prime shortly, has that full-time background with Caley Thistle and St Johnstone and others. You know, it's only 18 months ago he was playing in the Scottish Cup final for Caley Thistle, so that sort of shows his calibre. He'd been at Strathspey for not even 2 months, and it's quite strange, shall we say, how that's worked out. I don't think he only played twice. He wasn't fit when he arrived. He'd had an injury, but for whatever reason it hasn't quite gone to plan at Strathspey. I know Ryan Essen was keen to keep him, but I think there was maybe other issues or disagreements perhaps beyond what was going on the pitch, which led to his departure for Seafield Park.
Yeah, another tight affair there between Brechin City and Fraserburgh, similar to the game earlier in the season.
A draw for Fraserburgh, who'd have thought it? What's that, 9?
9 out of 18 league games they've drawn, but I thought, you're speaking about Fraserburgh third, I thought it was a typically sort of dogged Fraserburgh performance in conditions that they're maybe a bit more used to than Brechin with the wind, but it kind of felt to me like in the highlights there wasn't really an abundance of clear-cut chances. There's a lot of maybe balls into the box and scrambles, and the wind maybe holding it up or swirling it towards goal and things, and those sort of things. But in terms of really gilt-edged chances, there maybe wasn't too much. I think the big moment, or the sort of two big moments in the game at 1-0 to Brechin, is probably Killian Sheridan's chance when he's through 1-on-1, because you would back him to score and you would say probably should score, and if he does, then at 2-0 it's realistically would be game over. I think I would add to that Fraser McLeod's one where Joe Barber pulls off a really good save. I don't think you could ask any more of Fraser McLeod in terms of the effort, but that's the other one where if Brechin had scored there and it was 2-0, you would have fancied them to see it out, but at 1-0 Fraserburgh are always in the game, and generally that type of game, if they're trailing and it's close, they'll come on strong towards the end, and that's exactly what happened. And got their rewards with an equaliser, and I'd say over the balance that was probably about right. And although Brechin, Patrick Craig was sort of saying he was happy with the performance but disappointed with the result, I don't think it's a worse result for the meet necessarily, because if you look, since Brechin came into the Highland League, Fraserburgh have been their bogey team. That's 9 meetings between League and League Cup, and Fraserburgh have won 5 and 3 draws and only lost 1, so I don't think Brechin should be too disheartened with a draw.
Stats. Brechin unhappy though with Fraserburgh's equaliser. What did you make of the complaint? Push on Brad Mackay. You can't see it in the. I mean, you can't see the incident in the highlights. I'm not saying it's a push.
I'm saying it's not a push. No, I mean, it's a brush off at best, because it's not as if the hand movement pushes Brad Mackay.
Brad Mackay was moving backwards anyway.
He's going back to try and head a ball and get purchase on it, and Kieran Simpson's honestly, it's the faintest of touches when you see the replay in slow motion. For me, I think I'd be raging if I had scored that goal and it had been chalked off.
Well, if you look at it, I think really what you have to weigh up is the contact enough to knock Brad Mackay off balance and therefore impede his ability to head the ball away? And for me, the answer is no, because as you're saying, there's barely any contact. He steps back of his own accord, gets a header in, and I think the wind's done him as much as anything when it comes to trying to get a decent clearing header, and it's a good finish for Kieran Simpson. But I think referee Harry Bruce got it right, and if that
twice in one show.
Exactly, it's the spirit of Christmas after all. But a season of goodwill and all that. But I think if you were disallowing that and saying that was a foul, you'd be given free kicks or penalties every time a ball was crossed into the box. So I think right decision, goal should stand.
Okay, well, 6 other games from the Brechin Highland League on Saturday to discuss, despite fears over the windy weather. We've got a lot of games played. Got them all played, did we?
Just one. Keith Rothis fell, which wasn't a wind that put that off, and I think there was a bit what would I say, disappointment at the decision for referee Scott Donohoe to put that one off. Both.
Oh, I thought it was a yin and yang.
He's on the naughty list.
He's back.
No, I
didn't
see the pitch, so I couldn't say, but I ken that both teams were willing to play in the area that was deemed to be too heavy to play on. Was pretty minute, I was told, but we'll see. The referee's decision's final ultimately.
Enjoy your coal, Scott. Nairn County 1, Banks of D4. We'll start with that one. Seems from the report, which is all I've seen, that they were reasonably comfortable. Liam Jewell, Michael Phillipson came Winton, then Phillipson again. Had D 4-0 up. Gary Kerr netted a late consolation for the home side.
It's funny because Nairn started quite well. Daniel Hoban made a couple of decent saves. Ross Tokley, I think, was quite encouraged by the sort of first 20-25 minutes, but he then felt the goals that they lost were quite naive, and he sort of felt like against a good team like Banks of D, well, against anyone, but especially one of the teams at the top end of the table, he felt he couldn't be giving up the goals as easily as Nairn did, and that sort of, once it was 2-0 at half time, they're on the back foot, and then Nairn had the conditions in their favour, the wind in their favour second half, and it's that old adage, a wee bit of, if you can get the next goal then you'll see, but they got caught trying to play out for the back, and Kane Winton scored a third, and I think that put it to bed really. But I mean, good result again for Banks of D, and with Brechin drawing, it just pulls them a wee bit closer, and right now it's nicely poised. Like Brechin, Brora, Banks of D, they've all got 16 games to play. Brechin 45 points, Brora 43, Banks of D 38, and Ken, it's all sort of
the head-to-heads are going to be the important bit.
Well, they've all, I'd say Banks of D have to go to Glebe Park and Dudgeon Park, and potentially, in terms of the head-to-head, you'd say Brora have the advantage because they've got Brechin and Banks of D at home, but remains to be seen. I do think all three of them, as much as it'd be a big ask to win every game you've got left, I think all three of them are probably looking, going 16 games, if we can win them all, we'll win the league, because although they would need favours elsewhere, even Banks of D, if they win their if they were to win their last 16 games, that would take them to 86 points, which, you know, it would take a fair effort, and it could happen, but it would take a fair effort to not win the league with that amount of points. So I think rightly all three of them still feel they've got a good chance, and we'll see how it develops. Last thing I would say about that game at Station Park is a word for Nairn's Brodie Watson, who's making his Highland League debut, who Ross Tokley was praising, felt he was very good for his sort of first appearance at the level, he's somebody they signed in the summer, and due to sort of various factors he was loaned back to Inverness Athletics, so Saturday was his first competitive appearance for Nairn, and he did well by all accounts.
How many Brodies in the Highland League now, Paul?
Too many.
Right, we've discussed the top three. We now come on to the teams currently sitting 4th and 5th who met at the weekend. Clatnacurran 2, Inverurie Locos 2. Rory McLeod headed home Craig Laurie's corner early to give the Lily Whites a lead. Cole Anderson quickly restored parity for Locos from Blair Smith's cutback on 55 minutes. The Railway men went ahead with... It was a controversial penalty, depending who you listen to. Referee Scott Leslie ruled that Cole Anderson had been tripped and Paul Coots scored from the spot. However, just after the hour mark, Craig Laurie, 17 years old, son of Clack legend Blair Laurie, who's a first-team coach with the Lily Whites, he scored his first goal for the Inverness outfit with a corner? Direct from a corner.
It's not many players will score their first senior goal direct via corner, so it's a nice... distinction for Craig Laurie to have, but he's somebody that's come into Clark's team the last month, 6 weeks, having sort of been around it since the start of the season, and he's done really well. And I was laughing because Conor Gethins was saying afterwards that he was a more intelligent footballer than his dad, so I'm not sure if it was a wind up for, but he wasn't as quick as his dad, but he was more intelligent apparently, so Blair might need to have words about that at training.
Has anyone seen this penalty?
I have, and we'll have it on screen. And again, differing views between the two managers on a lot of things, I think, on Saturday. But the penalty, which we should hopefully be showing you now, with the footage we've got, it's hard to tell. Cole Anderson sort of sandwiched. I would assume Scott Leslie's seen that his sort of heels are clipped, and he is right there in as good a position as he could be really to see it. So I would be inclined to say he got it right, but Clark, certainly Rory McLeod and Jacob Kerr that were closest to it weren't happy, but it's difficult to tell. But Locos were adamant it was a penalty, and that was one difference of opinion, and then the outcome was the other. I think Clark were the more content with a point, shall we say. Dean Donaldson felt Inverurie had, other than the first 10 minutes, had dominated most of the encounter and felt they should have come away with more. But I think overall, if you look at both teams, they're having good seasons. They're sitting 4th and 5th, and I mean with Clark especially, if you'd said they'd be sitting 4th at Christmas, you wouldn't have expected that, but it just shows the sort of turnaround there's been in the improvement that Conor Gethins has been able to get out of them.
Talking of improvement, Cole Anderson seems to be having a very good season for Locos. He's really matured this term, and here's this game. It's a goal, and he's involved in the penalty incident for the second goal. He just seems to be involved every week. I find that we're always talking about goal or assist or something from Cole Anderson. So clearly he's a chip off the old block. If we're talking about dads and sons here.
The one last thing to say about this game is to give somebody their credit. Our report said it was mentioned Cole Anderson, Blair Smith's cutback, but I believe, having seen it, was actually Daniel Agnew, so better give Daniel Agnew his credit Daniel for the assist.
Yes, but yes, Clack 4th going into Christmas clackers. Sorry. Forest Mechanics 3, Strathspey Thistle 3. Sounded like a good game, this one. Strathspey ending 2024 with a point, battled back from behind twice. Liam Sheehan cancelled out Jordan Alonga's early goal for Forest. Alonga then finished off a Kyle McLeod header, and Josh Race levelled things again for the Jags. That was all before half-time. In the second half, Sean Ellis's header put Strathspey ahead, and you're thinking, Strathspey getting all 3 points here. But Liam Grant's free kick meant it was spoils shared. I mean, it's one of those. It's hard to say who it's a better result for, is it? But leading 3-2.
It's a better result for Strathspey, because I've been seeing highlights of this game as well. At 1-0, Forrest had some good chances where they could have been further ahead. So I think for Strathspey to stay in the game and then take something out of it, it's a good result. A couple of cracking goals that are worth mentioning. Liam Shewan's finish is top notch, and Liam Grant's goal, Forrest's third goal, was a belter of a strike as well, right into the top corner. It's interesting, I think, as well with Strathspey, Sean Ellis coming on and scoring. He was there as a trialist, and somebody that Highland League fans will probably remember from his time at Fort William, and he's been out Australia and places like that and played actually at a really high level in Australia. He was like, I think, the Victorian Premier League, which is sort of one of the leagues below the Australian top flight, and is traditionally a very sort of strong league. So Sean Ellis is a player who, although he's now 34, could potentially be a decent find for Strathspey if they end up signing him. And Forrest also been busy with bringing somebody in, and Darren Mota, who signed before kick-off, who's a fullback, 21-year-old who'd been on a scholarship in America but was originally from Inverness, and he'd been with like Ross County and Cally Thistle as a youth, so he's got the makings of a decent signing, you would think, for the Can-Cans as well. And the last thing I say about this game is Ryan Essen at Strathspey has bemoaned maybe marginal decisions going against him this season, or the big calls when they've needed maybe a bit of rub of the green, they've gone against him. Well, they certainly got one with their second goal on Saturday, because I thought it was pretty clear watching the footage that Dylan Lawrence fouled Sam Nixon in the build-up to Josh Race's goal, but for whatever reason referee Alex Ross didn't give it, but we should have had it on screen. But it was one of them where I think 99 times out of 100 the referee would give a free kick.
Okay, that result relevant to the next one. Lossiemouth 0, Turriff United 2. Lossiemouth, one of those teams who are just above Strathspey in the standings. Lossie now no wins since September. 2 goals from Rhys McHugh, the difference here. Sounded like reasonably controlled performance from Turriff to win it. Are Lossie looking over their shoulders?
It should be. I think they should be. Strathspey are scrapping and fighting away, and they've certainly improved from what we've seen in recent campaigns under Ryan Essen. And Lossie are just stuck in a rut at the minute. I'm sure maybe one win will maybe get them going a little bit, because when we saw Keith were toiling a few weeks ago, but all of a sudden, bang, 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 and you've put a bit of daylight between yourselves and the teams behind you. Lossie need to do that, because I think Strathspey are just chipping away, and as we can see, a point here and there, like they get at Mossett Park, suddenly you're looking up at teams above you rather than behind you.
Well, it's this thing a wee bit again. It's like we were talking about head-to-heads at the top of the table, but the sort of head-to-heads, Lossie and Strathspey and Rothes, who are just a point separating the three of them, they'll be critical. And right now, you couldn't, Wick are very much in there as well. They're on 13 points, so they, those sort of and I mean, we were meant to have them last weekend actually. It was meant to be Rothes against Lossie and Strathspey against Wick, and they were all postponed. So whenever those 2 games are rearranged, they could have a big bearing on things. In terms of Saturday's game, give Turriff credit as well. A good away win for them in all competitions. Now their last 5, it's 4 wins and a draw, so it's looking a lot rosier again for Turriff. And amazing, even getting 2 or 3 players back for injury, and like say even bringing in Mackenzie Taylor, and now he's had a few games. I think he's sort of really found his feet, and it's just things are clicking again for Turriff. But they maybe got a helping hand as well with what you're saying about Lossie. It's like I think gifted away the first goal with a short back pass after 4 minutes and things like that. And when you're in need of a result and struggling a wee bit, you can't be doing things like that. Okay,
Buckie Thistle 1, Huntly 0. Another tight result this one, but Aaron Nicholson, Bucky's new signing, coming off the bench to score a late winner. It sounded like, it sounded like a minging day everywhere, right?
But it sounded particularly minging at Bucky.
The best quotes. I'll just read the quotes.
Minging, is that the term we're using?
Huntly manager Colin Charlesworth, who, lost the game, so perhaps, it
has
not an agenda, but it's more likely to bring up the conditions. He described it as the worst conditions I've seen in all of my 15 to 16 years in the Highland League. But he did do the thing that I always think of the Highland League. If you get to half time, doesn't matter what the weather is. As we discussed earlier in the second half, they want the game to finish. They want the game to be played to conclusion.
Well, in fairness, Lewis McKinnon did also mention the conditions as well, and said that it was pretty challenging and felt they'd done well to get it played. And as you say, it is that element, I think, and it's maybe relevant for a few games on Saturday as well, where it was like we've started and it wasn't too bad, so we'll sort of persevere.
We'll
hug on, but it was getting
anything could happen in that
getting worse and worse. But it's just winter in the north of Scotland, is it? You've to find ways and means sometimes. And I do think, again, I feel like I've done nothing but praise referees today, but this is where I think the referees are quite good generally, in terms of if teams are willing to play and want to continue or whatever, there is generally a bit of wriggle room to try and get games played. And in terms of the actual result, good win for Bucky to get back to winning ways after a sort of couple of strong performances where they've drawn, and good for the new man Aaron Nicholson to get a debut goal as well. And I mean, he's somebody I think looks a pretty shrewd signing for Bucky. He was second half of last season he didn't feature too much for Nairn, but he did well enough for Nairn last season. Hat-trick in the North of Scotland Cup final. Moved down to Edinburgh to university and signed for Linlithgow Rose. Had a wee loan spell before he went to uni at Strathspey and scored 5 goals for them at the start of the season. And for whatever reason, he's now, I don't think he particularly enjoyed uni, and he's come back up the road, and Bucky have signed him, and I think he's sort of proven himself a bit at the level already, but he's only 19, so you think there's a lot of potential there as well. And Bucky, it's no secret, have been sort of pursuing another striker or another attacking player for a while, so I ken Lewis McKinnon's pleased to finally get him.
One more game to discuss from Saturday then, which was Devonvale 4, Wick Academy 1. Jamie McClellan fired the home side into the lead after 5 minutes, but Wick hit back before half time through Jack Henry. 2 minutes in the second half though, Ben Hermiston restored Vale's lead with a header, and then 2 goals in 2 minutes from Dem Eunice and Jack Mitchell. Jack Mitchell chipped the goalkeeper, I believe. That paid to that one. Vale with another victory there. Good season continues. Wick's frustrating time continues.
Aye, good day all round for Vale on Saturday. I mean, they winning and up to 30 points and ticking along nicely, and also their new floodlights are up and fitted, and I believe, even though it was a 1:30 kick-off, I believe, because Saturday was such a gloomy day, they were even on in the second half on Saturday, so good that they're working.
Survived the wind.
And with a blinding result.
Well, somebody, in fairness, you're on about blinding a couple of weeks ago. One of the Devonvale players had seen them or whatever, and he'd thought that they might be blinding given how many bulbs there were. But I think it's that. On a serious note, the floodlights thing, fair play to Devonvale, their board, and particularly their chairman Aaron Lorimer, because it was this time last year that they had the issue with one of the pylons blowing down, and it's sort of been hanging over them and hasn't been an easy thing to get sorted, and they've done it, and hopefully now everything goes according to plan and everything's sort of back to normal for them in terms of having lights again. And fair play to Wick, although the lights ended up being ready for Saturday. Fair play to Wick for agreeing to the early kick-off as well, because I think they left at 7 o'clock or 7:15 to get down to Banff for that early kick-off, the 1:30 kick-off. And it was probably part of them wishing they hadn't maybe bothered, in fairness, after the result. But I know they were short on bodies. A lot of guys that would usually play missing, and tough afternoon for them. And again, you're on about conditions again. Gary Manson, I think, felt it was pretty close to farcical maybe at points in the second half as well.
Okay then, well let's have a look at the Brechin Highland League table after Saturday's 8 matches. That's it then, all of the results from Saturday's Brechin Highland League action discussed. Just a reminder, if you'd also like to see highlights from North Lodge Park and from Glebe Park on Saturday, you can watch our main Highland League Weekly show over on the Press and Journal website, but you need to be a subscriber to do so. The good news is, and again, that you can become a subscriber at the moment via our Sport Pack for just £1 for your first 3 months. If you'd prefer to just keep watching these YouTube chats about all the weekend results, then we'll be back next week with our final edition of 2024, provided this weekend's matches go ahead. Of course, you never know at this time of year with the weather, but in the meantime, keep up to date with all of the Highland League and Highland League Weekly news from the Press and Journal via 2 means. You can follow us on our various social media feeds if you don't do so already. And in a similar vein, you can sign up to the Highland League Weekly newsletter. There's a link to do that below this video. In the meantime though, until we see you next, please enjoy the football, whichever games you're watching, and have a Merry Christmas.